Раз. Все. Всех приветствую. Меня зовут Толмачев Артем. Я занимаюсь реагированием на компьютерные инциденты. И сегодня мы с вами поговорим про расследование инцидентов, связанных с компрометацией операционной системы Astra Linux. Эта тема сейчас становится актуальной, потому что в рамках импортозамещения мы все чаще приезжаем в различные организации,
because we come across networks that are based on Astra Linux, or we come across machines where the system is deployed, and such machines can be compromised.
Сначала мы с вами рассмотрим, какие средства защиты есть в Astra Linux.
Let's talk about the security features in Astra Linux.
Как расследовать компьютерные инциденты, связанные с ней. После этого мы разберем, какие артефакты,
Then we'll discuss the artifacts
которые нам помогают при расследовании компьютерных инцидентов.
they provide.
После этого рассмотрим два компьютерных
We'll
инцидента,
discuss
которые были связаны с компрометацией Астры. И в конце я покажу
incidents related to Astra compromise, and finally I'll show you 2 zero-days vulnerabilities in older versions when I looked at that system.
Astra
Linux is a certified operating system. It's Debian-based, and it has certified security features that should help confront compromise. But if it's Debian-based, can you study it as a Debian system? Yes, and in 95% of cases, you wouldn't need to know any specific features of the system. If you need to understand the malware, if you need to understand what was the exploit that led to the penetration to the machine, then you can use your knowledge of Debian. But if we want to provide recommendations to the owner of the IT resource, other than upgrading the antivirus and reconfiguring the security features to prevent unauthorized access, we need to understand how the security features work and how we can adapt them to particular software. You can also look at what tactics and features attackers use, how they find what they need, and through that we can understand what APT is responsible for an attack. And we can look for various vulnerabilities to understand how the attackers use vulnerabilities. We'll look at integrity control mandates, we'll look at access control mandates. We'll look at application launch at interim integrity level, and we'll look at other security features that can be used. Mandate integrity control, that is the signature of Astra Linux. Many think that it's a sophisticated thing, but it has been around for quite a long time in various operating systems. It's called different names. One of the names is mandatory integrity control, and the purpose is to prevent system files from unauthorized modification and overwriting. It's implemented in Windows back in 2007. This is the pop-up window. Do you want to launch it with administrator rights? There are certain integrity levels in the system, and some processors can elevate them. The MIC in Windows is quite good, but there are many exploits that Microsoft confess they won't ever be able to address. So this is not a very good security feature overall. In macOS, there's also an implementation which is called System Integrity Protection, implemented only recently in 2015. There are special privileges, CSR privileges, there are CSR flags, and there are some system catalogs that are protected from writing. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Astra Linux. And in Linux, there's no particular implementation of that. But in 2003, LSM modules appeared that are integrated in the kernel, and upon the validation of access rights,
там системный вызов на корректность в соответствии с политиками мандатными.
It checks whether the instruction is correct. There are SE Linux and AppArmor, which are the more known ones. They have the benefits and disadvantages. We'll talk about LSM module called Parsec, implemented in Astra Linux.
На самом деле используется всего лишь от 0 до 63.
It has many secure integrity levels, but only from 0 to 63 are used. There are some integrity levels for particular processes, such as network services, virtualization, etc. We are interested in the two main types, which are used in 99% of instances. That's the low level and the high level. The 0 and the 63. The low level is for ordinary users who work on documents, work on the machine, and they shouldn't be doing system administration. Level 63 gives full access system file modification. We'll discuss these two levels going forward. And here's how inheriting of integrity levels happens. All objects receive a label. Simply put, it's a number from 0 to 63 that determines the integrity of an object. If I work at a low level of integrity, I launch a process, it inherits my metric. Say it's LibreOffice. If I create a document, I type something, I save something, it also inherits this integrity level of 0, and the file is created in the file system. And thus, the low integrity files are being created. We're not interested in them at this point. If I want to modify some system files to a higher level of integrity, say in the etc catalog, I cannot modify that catalog even if I'm a super user. That is the point of integrity mandate. If I'm on level 63, then I can modify the files at 0 integrity level as well. These levels are not hierarchical. There's a separate integrity level 8, for example, and a process with that integrity level cannot have influence on a process with integrity level 1. The only level that gives access to all other levels is 63. So let's look at what happens if an administrator creates a systemd service that uses some binary to automate work, and the binary was created at 0 level of integrity. Then the threat actor, when getting into the system, can modify the binary, and when it's launched, the attacker would get full access to the system. For that, there's the strict mode. But importantly, the high integrity level processes cannot run executables and libraries with a 0 level of integrity. To check whether MIC works or not, we can check that in our panel, our console. You can go to the config file, and there are two variables. If parsec max ilev equals 63, then the integrity level is there. If it is not present, then it's not on.
мандатному управлению доступа.
Let's proceed to mandatory access control.
Вводятся некоторые уровни конфиденциальности и категории.
There are levels and categories of confidentiality, and the main point of mandatory access control, as in any other operating systems, is that users do not determine the access to objects. As an administrator, I cannot create a document, an important document, and thereafter assign it a code of 777s, and it will be available for read and write to all users. Mac is also implemented in Parsec. It has many hierarchy levels, but in practice, from 0 to 4 are used. Let's look at hierarchical level. Suppose I created 4 hierarchical levels of information, starting from open to most sensitive. And importantly, reading top-down is possible, writing bottom-up is not allowed. And confidentiality categories are non-hierarchical. We can segregate the files for various teams, various departments. And if a document is owned by HR, then a process from sales would not be able to read that. Categories can add up, and a user may have multiple categories. And hierarchical access control also works. To look at mandatory attributes, you could look either in the dashboard. But if you have access to console, you can use PDPL user to look at the attributes. And please note the last line. 2 is my maximum hierarchical level of confidentiality. 63 means that my maximum level of integrity is 63. So I can log in using a high integrity level. 0 by 0 is categories. We don't want to discuss that. And the next 0 by 0, we also won't be discussing in this presentation. If we inspect a disk image to understand the mandate attributes of users, you want to go to etc parsec micdb, and there are files that describe the mandatory integrity levels in hex format. 3F is 63. Access control, pretty much the same, but we go to MacDB. The first level is the minimum level of the third one is the maximum level. If we want to look at the mandatory attributes of files, we can use the graphic interface, but that's not very convenient. We can also use PDP command with -ls key. But when we take a disk image of Astra and mounting it with extended attributes doesn't always work. And if it does, then the attributes are coded, and it's not very clear of how to decode them. So I came up with a life hack. Before we do an image, we run a PDP-ls command, and it would gather all the mandate attributes of all files. And then, if needed, we can explore this file. If we find a malware module or some configs that attackers left. To look at mandatory attributes of processes, we can either use a special utility, or there's a console utility, PDPL -ps. So you can see it returns a high level of integrity, and 942 has its own level of integrity for a graphic server.
Понимаю, что информации относительно много.
I understand that there might be a lot to digest. Let me give you an example. In early 2022, there was broadly advertised PwnKit's vulnerability, which can elevate privileges from user to root. I took a previous version of Astra from an image that I investigated, and I decided to see what I do if I run this exploit. First, let's look at mandatory attributes. I'm an ordinary user with a low level of integrity. After that, I run the exploit and I increase my privilege to root. Note that my integrity level is still low. And even though I'm a root, I try to write into etc shadow and I get permission denied. I try to kill init system process and I get permission denied. That is the essence of this security feature. That's protection from zero-day exploits. Even if I get root, I won't be able to get access to key system processes unless I log on as administrator. The most important log for incident investigation is the parsec log, which sits in the paths as shown here. Let's take a closer look. This shows how a user gets authenticated in the system. What is the difference from the auth log? It also logs mandatory attributes. So if we can see that there's a rogue user, we can see what rights they used to get into the system. Also, if we know that there's an incident and we don't know where to start, we can look at what protection features were disabled. The log has this information, and if something has been disabled, then there must be a sign of something not legitimate. Our classic audit log is extended, and importantly, there's the subject field that shows the mandatory attributes of an action. Here, for example, you can see that I'm trying to elevate my privileges under level 63 of integrity. Here, we can see a malware unit being started also with a 63 level of integrity. And we could, for example, investigate what was happening before they could elevate their privilege in the system. Another tool that is added is PrevLogin. It shows the statistics of users logging in and logging out. And it shows the statistics with attributes. In the left box, you can see that when a user logged in with a 0 level of integrity, you can see that there were 1,278 entries. This could point to the fact that this account was being brute forced. Very handy. These mandatory attributes also apply to software. For example, on database equipment. Database software.
Когда мы уже даем рекомендации о том, как повысить защищенность в системе после инцидента. Продолжаем. Еще появляется журнал регистрации событий Astra Safe Policy.
You also get the Astra Safe Policy event log that could show which events were disabled.
Дальше рассмотрим замкнутую программную среду.
The closed software environment is the next section. This is a very simple security feature implemented on the level of kernel, which prohibits the launch of files or libraries with the wrong electronic signature. There are two modes. First, it simply forbids the launch of files.
Чтобы это средство защиты там как-то отключить, мне нужны какие-то ядерные эксплойты.
To turn this off, I need some kernel-level exploits, but how do I do them if I can't run a kernel-level file? And there's a debug mode that can also be used very effectively. In the debug modes, the malware modules are not blocked, but they are logged by the system. And you can use that to send this information to CM or other monitoring tools to detect early stage compromise.
Кроме того, можно
And you
посмотреть,
can either use the graphic user interface or you can use a console command. And when we
то мы можем зайти
investigate the disk image, we can go to the config digsig init frames, and we're looking for the first line here. If it's
очень просто.
1, it's enabled. If it's 2, it's in debug mode.
Если грепать по слову block,
If we grep by the word block it,
что-либо блокировало.
we can see what has been blocked. Here I can see that some exploit has been blocked, and this could be a starting point in investigation of security incidents. The same is duplicated in other system logs as shown in the slide. Let us discuss app launch at intermediate integrity level. We have two utilities
с которых можно использовать, устанавливать мандатный контроль целостности и управление
that can set mandatory access level, SUBIC and SUMAC. Why we need that? Let's look at the diagram here. We can launch a web server at an intermediary integrity level, the level of 1. So when the server is compromised, even if that's a 0 days compromised, they get into the system, and then they need to elevate the privilege. And they wouldn't be able to do that because all system files have integrity level 63. This reduces the surface of attack and contains the attacker. To prevent the discretionary access levels, they will need to think of how to overcome this mandatory access level. And let's look at other security features. Hardened kernel, it operates a couple of % slower, but it has additional features such as randomized address space
и так далее. Все то, что используют ядерные эксплойты.
and other things to prevent kernel exploits. Blocking of console. So if a user compromises, if a user is compromised, they won't be able to get into console. We can block interpreters of Python and PHP, etc. You can block macros. If you get a phishing email with a file to install a macro, it wouldn't work. A very good security feature that works on the kernel level, that is denial to install the execution bit.
Системный графический киоск — это средство защиты, которое
System and graphic kiosk. It limits user actions and ptrace. You can block ptrace to read the address space, which is often used in various exploits. And let's look at computer incidents. There was an incident when there was information that hackers got access to a large government organization and were able to delete databases in a variety of regions with a lot of user data. And when this incident was investigated, there was a key machine in Astra Linux which was not used. And the key feature was that was linked to all the other departments of the organization.
Когда тестировали, специально прокинули сеть во все регионы и, видимо, либо оставили на потом, либо забыли, но злоумышленник этим воспользовался.
And the attacker used that.
Проверяем средства защиты. Да, у нас
Let's look at the security features. Let's look at the integrity level control, and the level is 63.
Строим таймлайны, мы знаем, в какой день это произошло.
We build a timeline, we know the day on which it occurred, and we can see that a bash history is created in this rather funny category. And here we can see the regional units where information was erased in the databases. We can also see a shell reversal on a machine where the compromise started. And this is a shell reversal on Python. This can help you get remote access to a computer. Then we check the mandatory attributes of a file, and we can see that it was created on a high level of integrity. And for experienced responders, it is clear that this machine was hacked through PostgreSQL. Because the home library would be in var lib, etc. So that's when bash history, that's where bash history was created. Let's look what is the integrity level of PostgreSQL, and we can see that it's on a high level of integrity. So it turns out that when the attacker compromised Postgres, he was able to run some commands in the system, and we can check the logs and see that it was really so.
На слайде видно, это ошибки.
The slide shows errors when the attacker tried to run a command and they failed, for example, for the reason of failing to provide the right password.
Гуглим from program,
Through from program. CVE. We find it, we won't discussing them now, but previously in PostgreSQL, if you knew the login and password to the database, you could run commands as a user, and that was a legitimate feature, but it was marked as a CVE, and then it was removed.
Вот. Соответственно, что ж такое-то? Вот такая у нас схема получилась обхода этого МКЦ.
And here's how this security feature was bypassed. The attacker was able to get to the system. They upload the malware module, and they get connected to other regions.
Какие мы можем рекомендации дать?
Recommendations to the information resource owner to turn on the security feature. If you have a server where nothing modifies, no new files are created, it only runs a database and one program, we turn on the security feature, and it would make life much more difficult for attackers. You can disable the execution bit, and you can change the integrity level of PostgreSQL. Had it been so, then the attacker wouldn't have been able to upload the files to the system directory and develop the attack. You can also consider blocking interpreters. For example, Python should not be used on that machine, so we could block Python.
Переходим к второму инциденту.
Let's proceed to incident 2.
Тоже появилось на форуме сообщение. Злоумышленник
There was a message about a compromise. The attacker published information about some employees, domain names, hashes.
как ни странно, оказался Astra.
And when we started investigating, we saw that it was an Astra Linux with a lot of subdomains, and one of the domains was compromised, and it was a test domain.
Проверяем средства защиты и видим, что
When we look at the security features, we can see that this feature is on. It blocks
проверяем журнал событий.
unsigned modules. We look at the event log, and we can see that a malware under the name of system MSF PHP was blocked. It was a binary, actually. And we also see a timestamp. We can also see the directory. If you go to that directory, you can find quite a few amazing files, such as linpiece, a file to look for vulnerabilities. The attacker also uploaded various file managers and also PHP exploits.
Почему он не загрузил нормальные модули ВПО? А потому что ему система не дала.
And why it failed to upload a working piece of malware? Because the system didn't let it to do so. But when he uploaded the PHP files, these are interpreted files, they worked.
Вот, например, здесь очень интересная была картина. Он несколько раз
This is a good example. He tried to run nmap several times. He failed because the security feature blocked that, and he started scanning ports. But then he got tired of it, and that he left the session, never to be seen again. The vulnerability in one PHP file, there was incorrect filtration.
И malware, и PHP-шники загружал.
And that's how he uploaded PHPs and malware. So how did he get all the domain hashes, the information about users, etc., if he couldn't compromise the system? And it's very straightforward. Backups were put in the directory, and thus he was able to download those files and use the credentials. Thus, the attacker exploited the vulnerability and was able to get into the machine, but he wasn't able to upload the interpreter from the Metasploit. All he was able to do was to upload PHPs, and he just stole whatever he could with the rights that he had at the time.
Какие можно дать рекомендации по настройке средств защиты?
Recommendations on configuration of security features. Run Apache on interim level of integrity. So when he compromises the web server, not only would he not be able to upload any binaries, but he would also have to overcome the mandatory control.
Каким-либо ZPS образом обойдет, это тоже бы ему помешало. Вот. И еще включить МКЦ. Кроме того, можно тоже рассмотреть здесь, включить блокировку.
We can also consider blocking interpreters.
PHP использовался там Python, Perl.
Had they not used PHP or Python or Perl to reduce the surface of attack. Moving on.
Не хочет. О. Ну, и покажу сейчас несколько уязвимостей.
And I'll show a few vulnerabilities of bypassing the mandatory integrity control.
Всех этих средствах защиты.
Once I understood all these tools, I was curious to explore
сделал виртуалку, через бросил там пароль.
Some features I
создал себе окружение. Как раз
created an environment with an older version of 2021.
Мы изначально имеем любого пользователя.
Suppose we have
потому что нам
a user. We take root just by example because we will be bypassing this mandatory integrity control.
абсолютно.
but it could be any user.
У нас низкий уровень целостности.
And we can see a low level of integrity. We have to increase this level to high.
Интересно посмотреть, какие способы закрепления в системе. Вот что я увидел, это то, что
So what
системный crontab
exploits can be used? I can see that crontab has a high level of integrity, but the user crontab sits in vars pool, creating separate files for all users.
на низком уровне целостности.
And it was created on a low level of integrity. That was a bug in the
Мы можем
system.
писать, в crontab, что хотим, запускать любые файлы и так далее.
And thus we can write anything and run anything in crontab. And how this could help you? Because it gets started from systemd unit, and systemd by default starts on integrity level system3, which is logical. This is one of the
Оно запустится с высоким уровнем
most important system daemons.
Записываем туда reverse shell, самый обычный.
We write a reverse shell,
Берем свою атакующую машину Kali и запускаем на ней listener.
and we launch listener.
Через минуту
And in a minute's time, we get a shell with
такая уязвимость.
full rights with
Оказалось, что баг был нетривиальный.
high integrity level. This
Исправили, сказали, что
bug was not known. I reported it, and I got a response that users should have their own cron tabs, etc.
Еще схема обхода, на всякий случай. Да?
Oh yes, and how to bypass it.
Каким образом должны были скомпрометировать систему.
So first we had to compromise the system. That could be an exploit or a web server or a database.
Целостности можем писать.
And because on the low level of integrity, we cannot write to system directories, but we can write to cron tab. We write a shell there that gets started with a high degree, high level of integrity. And another vulnerability was through bash RC.
Тоже обход МКЦ.
I was able to identify a bypass of mandatory control of integrity. Say we are an admin and we have a low level of integrity and we want to elevate.
Мы видим, что у него файлы окружения.
We can see that bash RC have a low level of integrity.
Схема обхода МКЦ работает только в том случае.
But this bypass would only work if we were to compromise an administrator who can relog onto the system with a high level of integrity. Why? Because we can modify bash RC. I don't know, you can change font in the terminal, you can change font color, and bash RC starts every time that you start a bash terminal.
Берем сюда и записываем такой shell. Мы сначала проверяем свою оболочку.
We can write this shell. We first check the integrity. We grab for the word высокий, which means high in Russian.
Если администратор заходит под высоким уровнем
And if the administrator logs on with a high level of integrity,
после этого reverse shell срабатывает.
and thereafter reverse shell would work. And with our listener, we get a high integrity level. And then we proceed to classic privilege elevation algorithm.
Небольшая схема. То есть изначально мы каким-либо
Is how it works.
опять же, систему.
So first we need to compromise the system. Then we need to overcome this inbuilt security feature. We compromise bash RC, which is at a low level of integrity. We wait for an admin with a high level of integrity to log on and launch the terminal, and we get the high level of integrity. This bug was quickly addressed. And now, if you are an administrator that can log on the system with a high level of integrity, then all of your directory, home directory, will be a high level of integrity, and only a high level of integrity administrator would be able to modify it. And that brings me to the end of my report, and now I will be happy to take your questions.
Так, сейчас будет планшет, да?
Okay, I understand that I'm getting a tablet now to read out your questions.
Так, вопрос от АЛ.
Okay, question from
Насколько
AL.
отличаются компьютерные инциденты на Астре в зависимости от
How
аппаратного обеспечения?
different are
Пожалуйста,
computer
ВПО, который работает
incidents
на Байкале
on
и работает на Эльбрусе.
Astra,
К счастью,
depending on
мне
the
такого не
hardware?
попадалось.
Have you come
Надеюсь,
across
никогда не
malware that
попадется.
works on Baikal,
Поэтому
doesn't work on
я
Elbrus?
думаю, что, скорее всего, не
Happily,
будет
I
отличаться,
haven't come
если
across
там будут
anything
какие-то
like that.
сложные rootkits.
I don't think there would be a
Так, вопрос от
difference
Данила.
unless there are some sophisticated
Как установить
rootkits.
Python 3.7 на Astra
How
Common
do you
Edition?
install Python 3.7 on Astra Common Edition?
Понятно. Ну, тут, по-моему, есть разработчики Astra. Предлагаю
I
к ним
think we have
обратиться с
Astra
вопросом.
developers here. I suggest that you ask them. I'll talk about incidents.
Почему при перезагрузке Astra слетает метка и холл? Бывает очень неудобно, ведь
Why, when you load Astra, the e-hole
очень много текста, я не знаю,
label
потому что я не разработчик Astra Linux, я всего лишь реагирую на инциденты и доклады,
cancels.
связанные именно с
I don't know. Sorry, I'm not an Astra Linux
Снова
developer.
Данила. Насколько security модули утяжеляют систему, объем
To
кода,
what
требования?
extent the security model makes the system
Как мне
heavier?
кажется, не сильно утяжеляет, потому
I
что
think it doesn't make the system much
эти вещи
heavier
уже и так встроены в Linux.
because these things are already built into
И
Linux.
какой-то прям особой нагрузки они не
I don't
дают.
think that
Как минимум,
it
в Astra
creates
я такого не
any
встречал.
meaningful
Возможно,
additional
там на SE Linux на
loads,
фарваре можно какие-то написать
especially on
очень
Astra.
сложные
Maybe
правила,
on
которые
SE
будут сильно
Linux, you can write some sophisticated rules that would
Сергей Краев.
load the system, but I haven't seen anything like that.
SQL мандатные метки появились, начиная с какой версии? Означает ли это, что СУБД защищена по стек?
Does that mean that your database is protected according to FSTech, which is the Federal Technology Supervision Authority? I'm not working there, so I can't answer that.
Так что лучше бы мандатов вообще не было.
Are there cases when mandates privileges are abused, when you can misconfigure?
Может злоумышленнику повысить привилегии.
Well,
Например, если там
if you
администратор
misconfigure,
чего-то системного каталога
there
убрал,
might be a possibility for the attacker to exploit.
может этим воспользоваться, естественно. Так, Данил Шварев. Спасибо за доклад.
Thank you for your presentation.
И перечисленных СЗИ в Астре, чтобы
Do you think the Astra security features that you have covered are enough to make other security features redundant? No, it's certainly not the case.
это всего лишь еще один эшелон.
Security features in Astra is yet another layer of security of your system. Of course, you want to use CMs and other security tools.
Целые сети.
And next question. Are there similar security features in Debian CentOS? Yes, you can find them in that, in SE Linux, etc. But there are some disadvantages. You have to implement those policies, or you have to download them, and there's no guarantee that they would work correctly.
По слайду 68 временная метка. Как
Slide 68, timestamp.
модифицированных файлов верная?
How do you validate that the time of modified files is correct? When you gather data from various sources, you get timestamps. If there's an intersection, then the timestamp is right in 99% of instances.
Достаточно ли настройка встроенных возможностей ИБ Astra Linux, чтобы она была защищена полностью? Любая система взламываемая
Inbuilt security features of Astra Linux enough? No, it's not enough. Any system is breakable.
Вы сказали, что преимущественно
You said
that
level 0 and 63 are used for the most time, even though there are 64 of them. Do you see any meaning in using the interim levels? I said that level 0 and level 63 are used for the user, but there is quite a lot of software working at intermediary level of integrity, and when you implement your security on Astra, you can think of your custom software working on intermediate
разграничения доступа.
integrity levels.
Александр Зайцев. Насколько ZPS и блокировка интерпретаторов мешают легитимному ПО на сервере?
How much interpreter blocking interferes with the work of legitimate software? And can there be exceptions? I think there's an exception file, but I may be mistaken.
Блокировка интерпретаторов, они очень сильно затрудняют.
The blocking of interpreters really makes it much more difficult for an attacker to compromise. And I've never seen this security feature to be bypassed. And there's a question from the room. Let's give a microphone to the gentleman over here.
Здравствуйте, я Александр из Беларуси.
I'm Alexander from Belarus.
Спасибо за доклад.
Thank you for your presentation. We use your product. That's not my product.
Вашего нанимателя.
Okay, we use the products of your company.
Тяжелые, но эффективные.
It is quite cumbersome, but quite effective.
Операционке стояло обязательно антивирус.
Our regulator requires that we should also have an antivirus on an operating system, but we don't want to use any third parties. Maybe Astra has a built-in antivirus. No, it doesn't have any built-in antivirus. We can have a chat with you offline about what antiviruses I would recommend, but I don't want to say it from the stage, not to sound as I'm advertising. But maybe something from Debian, maybe some simple antiviruses. The mandate level should be sufficient, but it's good to have an antivirus. All the inbuilt tools of security that are there in Astra we have discussed, and antivirus is not there. Thank you for your questions.